Welcome everyone to tonight's school committee meeting. Can I have the principals lead us in pledge tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. We have the consent agenda, which is the minutes of September 13th, and the oath of bills and payroll. I have a motion for that. That's your cue.
Yeah. So, make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Yeah.
That's right. Second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. We're at the section of the meeting here for any interested citizens that want to speak before the school committee tonight. We'll have another session opportunity at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, we'll move on to recognition. We have the student report.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me today. So at Shaker Lane, their first community meeting was held yesterday where students learned about heart. They listened to the story How to Fill a Bucket and will be making hearts to show how they can be bucket fillers themselves that will decorate the school. Also, their fall book fair will be held this coming Tuesday from 4:30 to 7:30. We look forward to this community event. At the middle school, LMS has had its back to school night on Monday, which was very well attended. And auditions for Honk, the Ugly Duckling, the musical, took place last week. Over 50 middle school students will be participating, so we look forward to the musical production at the end of November. Clubs and activities will also begin on Monday. At the high school, we have Columbus Day 2 Mondays from now, and the senior college planning night is also October 10th. The PSAT and the homecoming dance are also coming up really soon, and the scholarship trust drive is on October 14th.
Yeah. Kelly, you have a donation you'd like to recognize tonight?
Right, I'd like to thank the Cullum family for donating money to Russell Street School in memory of Jean Cullum. This money is greatly appreciated and will be used to enhance opportunities in the area of literacy for all students at Russell Street School. So thank you very much to the family. And again, we're thrilled that we had a donation in the memory of Jean directly to Russell Street School. So thank you.
We'll really appreciate the generosity and the benefit that it's going to have to the schools. We're on next to presentations. We have an update on professional development.
Dr. Jamie, you're up.
Okay.
She nodded in acknowledgement. I was
After Jamie and all.
That will be your
our whole audience.
Yeah, it's
An
beautiful,
audience.
huh? Just the document. That's number the long document that's part of the packet.
Oh, okay.
That's my second. Thank you. Okay, we're very, very pleased today to bring an expanded professional development report to the school committee, the parents, and the Littleton community. This presentation itself, like our improvement planning, like our strategic plan, has gone through several iterations and several revisions. It has been expanded as we expand our professional development opportunities and also react to very good suggestions on the part of the school committee members. Last year, for the first time, we included teacher presentations because Mr. Baker and other, specifically and other school committee members requested that teachers present so that parents in the community could get an idea of how teachers spend their time during the early release early release professional development, and what goes on specifically in the teacher-led and district-led professional development. As I indicated in the report to you, and I very rarely turn in 7-page documents that are single-spaced. It is a extensive process, and it's an extensive list. And what it represents are the numerous professional development pathways that this district offers. Goal number 1, within the professional development standard in Vision 2020, the Littleton's district strategic plan, calls for the district to offer a comprehensive professional development program for all staff, which includes district programs, site-based programs, college courses, workshops, and/or conferences. I read that purposely because we are indebted to the school committee and the community for funding these multiple pathways. Accordingly, this report has primarily a dual focus. The first is on the 12 early release professional development sessions, explaining what goes on in the school-based sessions and teacher-led, site-based professional development, district trainings. And this year, the expansion of the report includes reports from the teachers who have been involved in conferences and workshops and graduate courses outside of the school day. Part of Dr. Clenchy's leadership in this district has been to change the professional development opportunities that faculty and staff, professional staff, faculty have, to include up to 1/2 of that tuition reimbursement to go for workshops and conferences. And today, I'm going to change a little bit the order of the presentation of the teacher presentations, and I'm going to talk about have our 2 math teachers from the high school talk about their experiences in the College Board Advanced Placement trainings. These PD opportunities are all about connections. We have the schematic for the vision, the districts that accompanies the district's Vision 2020, and that's subtitled Meaningful Connections. We revised, there was extensive revision of the professional development goal this year within the district strategic plan, and that was to explore the nexus between the licensure requirements that our teachers are operating under and the programs and opportunities that we offer for staff. And part of these meaningful connections, the first part of these meaningful connections, are those workshops and trainings and conferences that teachers attend. In the teacher presentations that you hear today, you're going to be hearing 2 separate presentations, one from Shaker Lane and one from Russell Street, about how teachers are exploring different trainings, workshops, graduate courses that relate to responsive classroom. This is a research-based programmatic initiative that's school-wide at Russell Street, and it's integrated into the very heart of the HEART program at Shaker Lane. And it's important to hear how our teachers at Shaker Lane and Russell Street have explored different pathways through workshops and conferences to expand their lens, to expand their practice, to expand their perspectives on this research-based program. And I mentioned the math AP workshops. In the next, I think it's the next school committee presentation, you had the annual report of what we routinely present. And Dr. Harrington routinely presents a presentation on the AP tests and results in Littleton High School. Those AP results and tests are the result of the ongoing commitment of our faculty members to be returning teachers, experienced teachers, going back to an experienced teacher AP workshop, and it's a result of teachers stretching themselves, going into new coursework for the first time, and really modeling that exploration for their students, and being part of a AP workshop, College Board workshop, Summer Institute. Dr. Harrington belongs to a regional network, and the curriculum coordinators have sort of a job-alike group. They meet with department heads and similar curriculum coordinators within the area. And two different curriculum coordinators, separated by about 3 or 4 years, have come back and said to me that, you know, when they meet with the math teachers from surrounding districts, and when they talk about the MCAS results for Littleton High School, and they have shared 7 out of 10 students, 8 out of 10 students are in advanced, some of the folks in the room think it's a typo. It's not a typo. Because of the ongoing commitment of the Littleton High School math faculty members exploring upper math workshops and expanding their knowledge of their subject matter, you'll see that reflected in the student achievement and AP achievement report at the next school committee meeting. So now, back to this document. Each year the district has a responsibility of offering district-wide trainings. And you hear the phrase linking theory with practice often. And often, as educators, we ignore it because it's used too often and the connections are not always clear. The training last year was very well received by staff on executive functioning skills and behaviors by Sarah Ward, you know, a nationwide renowned presenter on executive functioning, brought a theoretical, deep, research-based knowledge about executive functioning and helped teachers in a developmentally appropriate way translate that into helping students, practical strategies to help students prepare for tests, complete their homework, and, which is a very, very difficult skill, write and express themselves with pen and paper. And so that was last year's district training. If you scroll down to the next page, under what we have for the site-based professional development, these are the teacher-led, teacher-developed professional development settings. There are proposals that teachers have to fill out that are approved by the building principal and school-based professional development team. And in the latest iteration of the professional development PD proposal, there is a spot where teachers can indicate that if they're requesting an outside consultant, outside training coming in, consultants coming into Littleton, they can request that. If there's a need for books, they can request that. And our teachers are taking that very seriously, and that's part of the budgetary planning on the part of the administrators. Last year at the high school, for grades 6 through 12, we brought in Facing History, Facing History and ourselves, which put on a seminar on teaching strategies that foster civil discourse. I haven't checked what the Supreme Court hearings were like today, but the civil discourse is sadly lacking. This was interdisciplinary. It was for English language arts and social science. And the Keys to Literacy is an organization that provides training in reading and writing. And they presented I'll talk about it more in detail later, the answer writing routine at the middle school for just grades 6 through 8, English language arts and special ed. That was the beginning. And we'll talk about that, that more. Russell Street School, it's important to point out, had a different approach to the school-based trainings. The school-based, site-based development is an important venue for curriculum alignment, curriculum development, and you saw, if you read the document, the numerous detailed curriculum alignment and development plans that teachers set forth. Russell Street decided to do something different. They went deep rather than broad, utilizing the expertise of professional staff within the district. Two sessions on student behavior were presented by Nancy Taylor, who's a BCBA. Those are a set of initials that may not have been part of our own elementary classroom experience. Then topics in instructional technology were presented by Julie Lord, who is the district's instructional technology coordinator, and Heidi McGregor, who since has been named a K-5 science and math specialist. And then finally, to all classroom teachers and SPED at Russell Street, the answer writing routine was offered. This answer writing routine was offered in yesterday's early release to all of the middle school faculty, so it's interdisciplinary, and they are going to have a follow-up full day of training October 3rd. And then finally, in the long list of graduate coursework, I gave you a little graphic about showing participation at the different schools in the tuition assistance program. The list of graduate coursework was presented in a list of which our office processed those courses. You can see wide range, which benefits the individual development of teachers, their subject area knowledge, their knowledge of students, student behavior, and instructional strategies and integration of technology. Every year, some themes emerge as more prevalent. We see growth mindset has emerged, social emotional learning. Every year, there are certain themes and patterns that emerge. So it's a very dynamic but rich list every year. That is, and the last segment lists very, very detailed workshops pursued by the nurses in our district. That's the intro or the overview of the coursework and my documents. I can stop for questions there before I introduce the teacher presentations. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Erica, any questions? Jen? So, go ahead, why don't we-
Okay, so now let me introduce who are the presentations for tonight in a little bit of a different order. First, we're going to have Julie Elmore and Laura Kern describe their experiences as participants in the College Board Advanced Placement Training. Next, the second presentation will be Holly Ballard, who provided a training at the high school for Littleton High School teachers in ELA and history on enriched English vocabulary instruction. The next presentation, teacher presentation, will be by Zach Hurdle, and he's going to be presenting on what happened. He led and facilitated 2 different cross-school PD, and it was important. It joined Littleton Middle School and Littleton High School special ed faculty in transition planning and program development. I feel it's important to showcase their work so that you have the transition of students from school to school is not without detailed planning. And more importantly, it's important to showcase that we do have a new position that's part of the Secondary Curriculum Council, and that is a 6 to 12 curriculum coordinator for special ed, and Mr. Hurdle was appointed to that position this year. We have one other teacher presentation that wasn't on the initial agenda for school committee, and that's a very detailed, interesting presentation by the Shaker Lane special education teachers. So you could see their planning on assessments, on the review of assessments, and that vertical planning is key from one grade to another. So in our teacher presentations today, you have the special represented today, you have special ed teachers at the primary grade level and the planning that was undertaken at the middle and the high school. And then I'll say a few brief words about the answer key writing routine, what it is and what it isn't. And then finally, we have the two teacher presentations about coursework experiences and workshop experiences in learning about responsive classroom. In the first presentation, Terrell Swasik and Perry Kenny will describe their experience pursuing an introductory overview of the responsive classroom program and relate connections to their classrooms and the Shaker Lane learning environment. And then Russell Street teachers Melissa Maxner and Kat Dale will describe their experience pursuing graduate coursework on the responsive classroom program and relate how that has informed their perspectives on the school-wide implementation of responsive classroom at the Russell Street.
We don't have any slides. We're
Okay.
Thank you very much for having us here and for listening to to us share our thoughts. My name is Julie Elmore. This is Laura Kern. We both teach in the math department at Littleton High School, and have been asked to speak about the PD that we've attended through the College Board. I do so for AP Calculus. Laura does so for AP Stats. Both of us have benefited tremendously from our participation in the College Board activities, but in very different ways. And so it's nice to have both of us, I think, here to talk about how these activities have helped us. This school year, I'm going to speak about my experiences first. This school year represents the 19th time I have taught AP Calculus. It also represents the 19th time I will attend the College Board's Conference for Experienced AP Teachers. And the fact that those two numbers are the same tells you how important I think that is. I give up 2 days out of my classroom, and every AP teacher will tell you how hard a decision that is to make, but it's invaluable. I go to this conference every year because, simply put, it's the best professional development I've ever gone to. Hands down, bar none. It makes sure that I'm on point with my content, but it does so much more than that. It allows me to improve my teaching, my instructional strategies, my level of rigor, the points of emphasis I need to make, my methods of assessment, and even more. I could go on and on. It also, and this is something I think might be lost on some, it gives me instructional ideas that can be used in all of my classes, not just calculus. And that's really, really important. I don't want to take time out of the classroom if it's only for one of my classes, but it benefits all five. It also gives me the opportunity to interact with other AP Calculus teachers from all over the region. And this sort of unstructured exchange of ideas and the connections I make with these people are invaluable when you step back and think about it, I am the only person in the town of Littleton that teaches calculus. That is, there's a blessing and a curse of teaching in a small school, and that's the curse part. And so attending these things gives me that opportunity to make connections with other people that do what I do. And that's really, really great. The other part that I've done, this past June, I was invited for the first time to participate in the reading of the calculus exams, meaning the grading. And this was a 9-day commitment for me. I graded AP exams for 7 straight days in a big building in Kansas City somewhere. But that also included 6 days out of the classroom because it was in early June. And with John's blessing, I was able to do that. It was a lot of work. But was totally worth it. The lessons I learned by reading quite literally hundreds, maybe thousands, I'm not sure, of exams cannot be duplicated any other way. By reading a book, by attending you can't replicate that. I've already become a better calculus teacher because of what I learned in June. After attending 18 of those conferences, it still made me better. And so, John, I have you to thank because I even before I applied, I'm like, hey, can I do this? And yes. He said, it's going to be great. And he was right. And it's something I hope to do, for years to come. And I really do. I appreciate the fact that all of you are allowing that to occur. You are directly helping our kids. And to that I say thank you. Laura, do you want to speak about stats?
Sure. So my sentiments are largely similar to Julie's in that it's sort of the best professional development that I've been to. Unlike Julie, I am on year 2 of teaching AP Stats. So it was tremendously helpful to spend a week. I did a summer institute. I did a week at Bridgewater through Mass Insight, where I spent a week with other stats teachers, somewhat locally. And I was able to get a ton of material. We went over how the exams are graded. I basically learned statistics in 1 week over the summer that I then taught to the students, and I felt like the year was super successful because of all the amazing resources I got from there. I also, like Julie was saying, made a ton of connections, and that was sort of the most important part. I'm the only AP Stats teacher, so there's nobody at the school to sort of check in with, and so it's really nice to have people that I can email who will get back to me. We share resources, share tests, we share news articles that come up that I can share in my classroom. And also, specifically, I've added some sort of more interesting components to the Algebra 2 classes just from learning stats over this summer, because stats has changed since you've all been in college. Well, not really, but everybody else. So it's a lot more interesting, it's a lot more fun, and I think that kids are really enjoying it. And I think
always been fascinating.
That sentiment isn't really shared among everyone. I mean, I personally didn't love stats in college, but I love it now, and I think the kids are really benefiting from all of the amazing experiences I've had.
Calculus is pretty cool.
All amazing. So thank you for allowing us to be part of it. And I think that, like Julie said, it's really been the most helpful part of professional development for me.
Do you all want to ask any questions? I don't know if this is the time.
That might be the best.
Yeah, I think we'll do
best
it
way
one
to
at
do
a time
this.
as you come up, so that we don't have to have you come back.
You
Of course,
asked
now
a
that
lot
it
of
did that, are you going to have any?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's really helpful, so I appreciate that you guys are taking advantage of it as well. So that's great.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding to participate in something that you see the second you're there. This is going to immediately change, meaning improve what is going on in my room, which means it's an immediate improvement for kids.
Just a question of curiosity, what insights did you get from reading the exams that you brought back to your classroom?
My mantra this year has become 3 simple words: communicate good math. And I learned through grading how important that is, and that cannot start in grade 12, or cannot start in AP calculus, regardless of grade. I have said that to my Algebra 1 kids. My schedule this year, I teach Algebra 1, grade 9, mostly, and calculus. And I teach nobody in between. I cannot start teaching them to communicate good math in grade 12. And so that's why I say the things I take away benefit everybody. Now it's, kind of wishy-washy math with a lovely answer is not lovely. Communicate good math. That's an example of one, but that's something I really took away.
Thank you.
you kind of got where my question was. I'd like maybe from everybody as they come up, sort of give one example of something they brought back from their experience with the, the education opportunity. You just touched on yours. How about?
So I've implemented some projects that I got as a result of doing this. We did a bias project last year where I had kids sort of go out in the district and go out in the schools and sort of intentionally create bias and collect data and sort of see what that looked like. What happens if you intentionally create bias? And they got some really interesting results. And so I think that they are seeing some sort of real life applications of statistics. So.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Holly Ballard. I'm a speech pathologist for grades 6 to 12 and the transition program beyond that. And I presented a session on enriched English vocabulary instruction for grades 9 to 12. And that would be my slide. Thank you. I just have one slide, and I'm setting a timer because speech therapists like to talk. And this is my favorite subject. I love teaching about vocabulary. And I'm a passionate advocate for the need for vocabulary instruction. So my presentation was to the Littleton English and History departments, and it came about kind of organically. So as a special educator, I work with a number of teachers in a consultation role about individual students who have language-based disabilities, often in the areas of word retrieval or poor language comprehension or poor language expression. And it was within those discussions about individual students that one of the teachers, Kate McCook, said, you know what, this doesn't apply to just this student. This could apply to every student. And would you be willing to come and, talk to the English department? And so I love that kind of thing because I get much more bang for my buck when I have other people do my dirty work. And so the English department heard about it or talked about it to members of the history department, and they were intrigued as well. And that was the basis for which we drew together, and I consulted them, what do you need? Right? Well, we have some very talented instructors in Littleton High School, and they do not need me to come to them and talk about what they need to teach, or in the case of history, who they need to teach about. But my background is different than that of education. So speech-language pathologists are an allied health profession. Our training is neurologically based. So I had to learn all the education stuff later, and it was hard. But as a result, when I look at vocabulary instruction, I'm not looking at SAT words or so on and so forth. I'm looking at how does the brain store words? How do you retrieve words? How do you combine words? And speech pathologists look at expressive language, how we communicate with others, in the form of what we call content, form, and use. So form is your grammar, and it's your organization in writing, right? And I like to liken that as to the frame of a house, the 2x4s that you see framing a house. And use is the purposes for which we communicate. And that's things like, are we working here to persuade? Are we working here to explain? Are we working on convincing others? Are we working on arguing against something? These are all the uses. And I liken that to the different rooms in the house. You use the kitchen for one thing, and the living room for another. But what you have that transcends everything is the content. And the content are our ideas and words. And in order for us to have rich ideas, we need rich words. And as kids go up through the years, academically, they really need to have better, more specific, more abstract words to be able to reflect those abstract concepts that we're trying to teach as they go through the grades. So I've talked a lot about the importance of vocabulary instruction because that's also what I stress to the teachers, right? But kids go in their early teen years from about 15,000 word families to their early 20s or mid-20s to having 25 to 35,000 word families. We can't teach that all in vocabulary lessons, right? So we have to look at what are all the ways that we can make every classroom a vocabulary-rich environment. And we have to make it fun, right? So when I talked about brain-based teaching strategies, one of the things that's really interesting to learn is, we've traditionally taught vocabulary with definitions or synonyms, but the brain doesn't like that. So if you actually look at, children's board books when they're little, you have all those little books of opposites, up, down, wet, dry, So, and the reason is the brain really likes that kind of balance and that balanced nature of opposites. So when you're teaching a vocabulary word, you're not just teaching what does this word mean, you have to give exemplars of what it is not. Not just antonyms, but real exemplars that kids can relate to contextually. So then they hold that word for long-term use. Because what we don't want them to do is learn it for a vocabulary test and then dump it, right? We want them to hold it. So that was my timer. So I went over. Okay. So that we also talked about implementing robust vocabulary instruction across classroom activities. And one of those things is to make it fun. There are certain comic strips that are really vocabulary rich. Calvin and Hobbes is a great example. I mean, he's got great vocabulary, that kid. Having an open dictionary in the classroom, just noticing when kids use a particular vocabulary word in their writing and making a big deal about it, putting that up on the board, highlighting good vocabulary use. Demonstrating good vocabulary use yourself. The kids come in after the Patriots lose, God forbid, and you're like, oh, why so morose? Rather than just like, wow, you all look sad. So you can embed it across your day. And the other final thing is that we have to work selectively. This is, again, brain-based about introducing words together, that we don't introduce too many things in a category. Everybody likes categories, and it feels intuitive that we would learn vocabulary terms in categories. But it makes it very hard for students to discriminate small differences if we introduce words at the same time. So if you would introduce the words adept and adroit at the same time, they actually have very slightly different meanings, but that's very hard to figure out if you're learning them at the same time. And the same thing would be true with like tyrant and despot, right? So what you want to do is, if you're introducing new words in the form of a vocabulary list, you want to be very selective about choosing words with very different meanings. And then the following year, introducing refined words in that area. So those are some of the things that we talked about. And the teachers were amenable. They asked if, I would continue to come back and talk about this a little bit more, and I would love to, because this is my favorite topic. But they were also looking at their own vocabulary lists that they're providing to their students. They were looking at creative ways to make vocabulary fun in the classroom. And I think it's also validating for them that the time spent on this is important time, right? There are so many demands on teachers every year. And it never seems to decrease, but it always seems to increase. Add this, add that, Have more work on persuasion, use more, primary sources. Do this, do that. And what can slip are things that are more boring, like potentially vocabulary instruction, which I just don't understand. But that is the reason that we felt it was important. So this is how we have tried within our district to use the expertise from one department to assist another. There are plenty of examples of that, but I should wind up. Does anybody have any questions?
Not right now.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
coming. Thanks. I guess in listening to Dr. Jamian's opening remarks, she's talking about connections. I didn't realize that my whole hoopla tonight is about connections. That's what special ed is. So when we talk about transition planning, yes, high school, we invite middle school staff to come up, and they bring the service delivery grids and the students' IEPs, so we get a good glimpse at what the students' needs are, what their areas of disabilities are, and then we begin to mesh that with the services that we offer, and then we kind of look at, okay, well, what sorts of courses are we going to need to offer with support next year? Are there general education classes that we need special ed support through inclusion? We look at Learning Center. And we also have between us the lab, the acronym Language Arts Based Classroom for really significantly disabled children. And so the sort of perfunctory takeaway is that we all get a baseline understanding of what we're going to be working with student-wise for the next year, begin to outline that and address those needs. The other nice piece of that, and the next slide, not yet, thank you, will highlight sort of the wide variety of folks that actually can come and participate. It's not just special education in a classroom setting, but also, Holly Ballard is a great example, speech services are provided. We provide counseling services at the high school. So we begin to look at how we're going to address the variety of student needs for the coming year. And we actually started this process in January for this September, because we have a few meetings throughout the year to develop professionally. It really is a pretty labor-intensive process. But I will say that one of the major takeaways for me is that when students walk into our department in September, we already have a kind of profile. We know what their strengths are, we know what their interests are, not just their disabilities and their needs. So we're able to get to know the students as students right away. And I think that's a really powerful opportunity that not everyone has. And so that's why the connective piece really struck me. Another key component, IEPs have timelines. They expire. And so we look at what are the dates? When are we going to have annual review team meetings? When are students up for their reevaluations? Again, to build that context for what our school year is going to look like with our students. The next bullet, it sort of overlaps the content piece. I can speak for myself. I worked really closely on 2 sessions with Andrew Padgington, who teaches 8th grade language arts-based math, and I teach the 9th, 10th grade. So we were able to sit down and say, okay, this is what I teach. Oh, great, this is what I'm going to do. So I knew before I met my students where to start, and that was huge. Not having that opportunity in the past was a little more trial and error, maybe some pre-tests, getting to know you activities. And I hope to have the opportunity to continue to build on aligning that framework. The English teachers did some work as well. I was a part of that because I was working with Andrea. It was great. One of the, I think, sort of highlights, not just transitioning into the high school, but out of the high school, the state of Massachusetts recognizes that disabilities don't stop at graduation. And we have a referral process to the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. They're the state agency who will help students with disabilities navigate life beyond high school. Michelle Hirth is our transition specialist. She actually invited Carol Bauer, who is our Massachusetts rehab rep, to come in and present to us so we can see what their services are, what sorts of students, disabilities they could serve, how they could meet a wide variety of needs, anything from helping with driver's licenses to working with disability services office at the collegiate level, we're adaptive transportation, job site training. It was mind-blowing to have this person in here to give us all of these avenues that we can then relate to families. And yes, it seems weird to talk about life after high school for kids who are just coming in, but for the really significantly disabled students that we have, it really is appropriate to begin looking, towards the end as early as possible. And that sort of wraps me into my last bullet there. And that when some graduates leave the language-based program, they don't leave Littleton High School. They transition to the transitions program where, again, we sort of do our own in-house job application process, interview skills. We look at on-the-job training, how to help navigate public transportation, those sorts of things. So can we just go to the last slide? Can I go up there for a second?
Of course.
Okay. So like, I love this because just to like talk for a second, sorry, we have 8th grade special education, we have high school special education, we have Holly Ballard, we have our transition specialists. Like this picture that was just sort of like taken, oh, here's a piece of evidence for Teach Point. Really what this is, but this image really encapsulates what's like the coming togetherness that happens. And so kind of double dipping there. So
picture of you saying this right now.
I'll look at that. Before I offer to take questions, I just want to preface it by saying special education, we work with a wide variety of student needs, and we're bound by pretty strict confidentiality. So I'll take your questions, but I may be limited in my response.
Not right now. I can't think of anything. No, it sounds great.
Awesome, great, thank you very much.
Just a comment. We've been discussing having special education at the table as a curriculum coordinator for 8 years. And the only thing that has prevented us from doing that has been finding the money to do it. But you can see from tonight why we didn't let go. And we were finally able to do what we knew all along was essential. And then you can see from Zach's presentation this evening how integral it is that special education should be at the table with all of the other curriculum specialists. So nice to see you here tonight, Zach. Thank you.
It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Dr. Jean?
Take it away.
Good evening. I have the easy part of the presentation. I get to do the introduction since there's 4 of us. My name is Jennifer Sundberg, and I am a special education teacher at Shaker Lane. I teach grades K1 and 2. And behind me is my team. I'll introduce them in a minute. This past winter and spring, we had the opportunity to get together as a team and take a look at formal assessments and curriculum-based measures. This is Rosaria Coaches. She is the special education teacher for 1st grade. And I have Tracy Johnson, the kindergarten special education teacher, and Sarah Hogan, the 2nd grade special education teacher.
So our overall goal for our professional development was to work as a vertical team, K2, and across grade levels to align our assessments and data collection methodology. We really wanted to be able to improve our consistency with measures and also to develop multiple data points for students for when we're making decisions. For students that we service directly, the data can be used to inform our instruction. The data can also be used to develop, document progress and to develop realistic measurable goals for students because it's based on data. For students who have been referred to our student success team at Shaker Lane, the data can be used to develop a baseline for where students are, to also look at or help identify an instructional focus where we should go with that student, and also make recommendations for any kind of interventions that may be needed for that student.
We created an inventory of formal, informal, and curriculum-based measures and determined the purpose of each assessment. Our team established a timetable for assessments and progress monitoring. We also practiced administering some of the newer assessments and explored the data reporting formats.
And as you can see up here, I'm just going to note some of the things that we did. So our assessment inventory, we took note of the assessments that we have. We made note of the names that we had. We categorized it by what subjects we were looking at, whether it be developmental or reading, phonological awareness, reading comprehension, spelling, or math. We also looked at whether it was a formal assessment or if it was criterion-based assessment. We talked about who should be receiving these assessments, what grade level, if they were on IEPs, if they were on 504s, if it was part of the SST process, like Rosaria had mentioned. There's many different purposes for assessments. We talked about screening, diagnostic baselines, benchmark progress monitoring, and when and how often to administer these tests. Some vary. Some are every year. Some it's a little bit more frequently. And then important to us is where are all these tests located? We have to be able to find them, in a timely manner. So really just whereabouts they are in the building so we can go and get them, sign them out. So if I'm using them, Rosaria might need to wait a little bit to use them. So that's it. It was just great to get together as a team, the special ed team, to really talk about all this information. Questions?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
So we finished with our 2 responsive classroom presentations. First, Shaker Lane. Right,
I'm Carrie Kenny. I teach first grade. My colleague, Terrell Swasik. So last spring, Terrell and I had the opportunity. One second. A blue background.
Blue background.
That's it.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
All right, last spring, Terrell and I had the opportunity to attend a one-day introductory workshop on responsive classroom. Some staff in the district have completed the full 5-day responsive classroom course. So Terrell and I are not experts by any means. However, we feel that attending the workshop has given us one more tool in our social emotional learning toolbox.
They kind of explain a little bit more about our toolbox. The HEART program at Shaker Lane is really the tradition of social emotional learning. Well before SEL was a word that we all knew, there was HEART at Shaker Lane. And H stands for honesty, E for effort, A for acceptance, R for respect, and T for take responsibility. And interestingly enough, a lot of those words start to bubble back up in some of the more recent initiatives. So that's kind of neat to know that, it was cool before it was current. But that's our tradition. Our program at Shaker Lane is second step program, and that is where lessons are explicitly taught to bolster skills on social emotional learning, focusing on the individual and then kind of building toward the community. Parts of the second step program include emotional awareness, self-regulation, and problem solving with one another. Finally, a philosophy that we use at Shaker Lane is responsive classroom, which is the PD that we were at, the one-day workshop. And that's a philosophy that builds a classroom climate of respectful, engaged learners. They're very complementary to one another, responsive classroom and second step. In fact, Perry found a couple of links that really do a lovely job of explaining how they work well together. And I put the link there, we don't have to touch that. And I'll let Perry talk a little bit more about what that PD, how we brought it back into our classrooms.
Just need the next slide. Okay. So one aspect of the responsive classroom is the morning meeting. It's an engaging way to start the day. We begin with a greeting. Students and teachers greet one another by name. It sets the tone by helping all students feel noticed and appreciated. Some examples are like a high five greeting, a wave, a left and right greeting where they greet people to the left and to the right of themselves. And then we have a little video clip that you can see a greeting that I call 2468.
It's very short, so.
Yes, it's very short.
Say, who do we appreciate? Josh, Yay, Josh.
I'll play it again, you can hear the sound.
4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? Josh, Josh, yay, Josh. Another aspect of the morning meeting is the activity, and the activity helps practice social and academic skills. One activity that we often do is called turn and talk. One student turns to the student beside them and talks about a specific topic, what they did over the weekend, a favorite character from a book, give an opinion if they like dogs or cats more and why. Then the other student has a turn to talk. And after they take turns reporting their ideas to the class. Then we have the morning message. Students read and interact with a short message written by their teacher. The message is crafted to help students focus on the work they'll do in school that day. You can see on the slide an example of a morning message from my classroom.
I guess in closing, thanks for the opportunity for the PD. Social emotional learning has kind of been going on in classrooms for ages, and I guarantee you that your favorite teachers did some of that as it is. They just didn't call it social emotional learning. But as educators, it was really nice to be able to refine and bring in new ideas thanks to our recent PD. And it helps us all work towards building a common vocabulary in this area. And basically, the overarching ideas are that both programs build a strong sense of community, set children up for success socially and academically. And particularly with a responsive classroom, it promotes a climate of trust, academic growth, and positive behavior because it launches each school day with a whole class gathering that kind of sets the tone for the day. So, yeah, thank you for that opportunity.
Questions?
Yeah, I guess just have you seen results in your classroom? Do you feel like your kids are more a community, less problems on the playground?
Yes, definitely. I think Responsive Classroom helps, but really for me, it is the Second Step program that has helped tremendously, giving them the language to use and the opportunities and the role playing throughout the year. That to me has made a big difference, and also just building a sense of community within the classroom. And I think it's actually both Responsive Classroom does that as well as the Second Step.
What she said. I agree. The specifics of Second Step really give them the language and the words, particularly for problem solving with peers. But I don't think it would work as well if we didn't have the community gatherings in the morning to kind of touch base and make sure everyone's ready to learn for that day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now,
I am Melissa Maxner from Catdale, and we are presenting on the Responsive Classroom workshops that we have attended and how we've applied them in our classroom. I have attended 3 different Responsive Classroom workshops now, and I really love the atmosphere of them. That's why I keep going back. Some of the main points of that atmosphere, the leaders really immerse you in the program. So all of the skills and the strategies that they're teaching, they're using. You're surrounded by a community of other educators, so that leads to real, authentic dialogue. So you're bringing up things that have actually happened in your classroom, and you're hearing ideas from other teachers on how they address that situation. So it's really authentic. And then they also have continued support. So you get books to bring home at every workshop. You have resources that you can access on their website. And I follow them on social media, so ideas are always popping up there to use in your classroom.
As Carol and Perry alluded to, there's different aspects to the responsive classroom approach. They talked about morning meeting. We're going to focus on discipline and how do we have proactive discipline when we use responsive classroom. So there's 4 different ideas that we want to look at, and that's safe and predictable environment. If you've worked with kids before, you know that consistency and structure is so important. The day you change something, behavior goes awry. So making sure as a teacher that you're well prepared ahead of time and how you're doing something is the same from day day-to-day, and that's something I really take in my classroom. Another thing that we want to look at in regards to behavior and minimizing it in the classroom is building meaningful relationships. This is particularly important to me because I've noticed that the more time you take to build relationships, the less behavior there is. And that's important to take time to build relationships between the teacher and the student, and then also how to teach students to build those relationships. For example, like if you're in the middle of a math center, you know, a kid might come up, they might make a connection, you're at the teacher's table, and they might say, hey, Mrs. Deal, I have something to tell you. And one thing that you might want to do in a responsive classroom is say, hey, that's really important, let's talk about it later. So you're recognizing that that's an important idea that they want to share, but right now is not a good time. Another thing that we want to think about with minimizing behavior is explicit teaching of positive behaviors. So that's really modeling good behavior. So for example, okay, boys and girls, we're at morning meeting, and teaching them what does it look like, and you're modeling it. And then have another student model it, and then we are all modeling it. And then the last thing we want to think about is clear purpose for rules, routines, and expectations. Responsive Classroom really taught me to really utilize the first 6 weeks to establish a healthy learning environment. And when I came in my first year, I was like, oh, 6 weeks with all this curriculum to do. And I didn't. I scrunched it down, and now I really take those 6 weeks because it makes a huge difference. You make up for it later on in the year. So it's really important to establish rules, and it's not your rules. The minute my kids come into my classroom, I'm always saying, okay, boys and girls, this is our classroom. What do we want our year to look like? What do we want our norms to look like in the classroom, and what are our expectations? So you're kind of getting that dialogue started, and then in the next 2 weeks and the third week of school, you're kind of creating those rules together, and then you're signing a contract together.
One of the workshops that I attended was all about communication. So this was, how am I communicating with my students? How do I want my students to communicate with each other? So one of the big takeaways was teacher language, and there are 3 different types of teacher language. So envisioning is looking to the future. So if I'm using envisioning language at the start of science class, I might say, okay, for the next 40 minutes, we are going to be scientists. So it really gets them in that mindset of what is our goal, what is our purpose, and how am I going to be that role? How am I going to be a scientist? Another type of teacher language is reinforcing. So like Kat mentioned, we're always modeling the behavior that we want. So after the modeling is through, and you notice students actually doing the things that you've modeled, we want to reinforce that. So I'll say things like, I noticed that at morning meeting today, everyone was making eye contact with their neighbors. Or I saw that we responded immediately to the chime when we heard it. So reinforcing that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then the last one is reminding language. So if sometimes they're not totally on par with where they're supposed to be, they have a gentle reminder on how to get back to it. Because we all make mistakes and sometimes need to be reminded of how to do it properly. So for reminding language, I used it today. I have a chime in my classroom. So I ring the chime, and then I ask the students, can someone remind me one thing that we do when we hear the chime? And someone will report back, hands free, eyes on me, and voices off. I also try to encourage the student-to-student communication, because they're not just learning from me, they're learning from their peers as well. So also coming back to the explicit teaching of an effective listener. So an effective listener is someone who's not distracted, who's focused, who's thinking about what their classmates or their partner is talking about. And a great way for them to show that they're being an effective listener is using this sentence starter, what I hear you saying is. So they'll start with that, and then they'll repeat the main idea of their partner or their classmates' thoughts, but in their own words. So it's getting them thinking about what their classmates are saying and being able to use their own words to express it. And then another thing that I'm trying this year is not repeating student answers.
So when I'm asking a question to a whole group and I'm repeating the answer that was given, I'm teaching the students to listen to me, not each other. So instead of repeating the answer, even if the student is very quiet, I'll ask a neighbor, did you hear what that person said? Can you repeat it to the class? So that they're listening to each other and they're learning from each other, not just me. And then the last takeaway I had was for tone of voice. So whenever you're talking with your students, I always try to have a calm, even, matter-of-fact tone. We never want to raise our voice or get angry because that could harm our relationship with our students. And it can sometimes make them embarrassed, make them not feel comfortable. And we want them to always feel uncomfortable. We want an inviting environment. We want them to be able to share their thoughts. So I want it to be reliable and predictable. They always know that, so if you're doing something wrong, I'm going to remind you how to do it better. And we'll work towards it, and we'll get there eventually. And never judgmental, so that piece that we always want the students to feel welcome in the classroom, and we always want them to feel like they can share their ideas, so we never want to be judgmental of anything that they're sharing with us.
Any questions?
Just thinking about being a mom and, you know, doing all these things.
With their notes.
Yeah.
Derek?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where should I stand to show posters?
Can you hold just a second before everybody walks out?
Oh.
I wanted to thank you all first.
Jason, 1 second, he wants to thank you.
Well, no.
Come on down.
I wanted to thank each of you for coming tonight. I know this is a kind of an extra set of activities onto an already long day here, but I found it exceptionally beneficial to hear, you know, firsthand some of the things that you're doing with the education activities that you're undertaking, how you're sharing them back into the classroom, and then also the opportunity for the community to see on a broader perspective what is coming out of the professional development days that we are doing here. I know parents that are involved in the classrooms and the other pieces may see it directly themselves, but this is an opportunity for our massive audience that is tuned in to every word here for them to also see the benefits of the investment that we're making in the staff and how it's having an impact on the students. So I want to just thank you, all of you, before you each filtered out and didn't tune back in to watch the end of the meeting to hear me say that. So thank you very much.
Take a line from Charity Bell. The month of September for teachers, busy all year, but they're beginning a new year. They have back to school evenings, they have other commitments. And then the administration politely asks them to come and share your experiences with us. Meanwhile, they're probably thinking about how many more hours they need to put in tonight so that they're ready tomorrow. So, as a superintendent, I do understand it, and I'm so appreciative that you came out tonight and shared your experiences with us. Although this evening was on professional development, it was evident, more than evident, it was obvious in the vertical alignment we have, K through 12 in our district. And you could see, you could feel it, the synergy we have in our district. And it was a narrow topic, but I hope all of you take away the broader energy that was in the room and the cohesiveness and the collaboration that occurs on a daily basis, and the cross-school collaboration, which is so important as well. So thank you so much for coming out this evening, and have a safe drive.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, if you can't see it, Darryl.
That's okay.
If you could put my my last one there, the writing, yeah, answer key.
That one?
Yes. So this was one of the site-based professional development activities last year. Every single Russell Street teacher, classroom teacher, and special education liaison participated in this training. And all of Littleton Middle School, ELA and SPED, that was the first round with Mr. Pascucci, the ELA curriculum coordinator, 6 to 12. So this was the spring trainings, and you saw that on the list for the site-based, professional development. They came out of teacher-based facilitated proposals. And it came organically. A number of teachers have gone out of the district, attended Keys to Literacy workshops, and they requested that the district bring the trainers here. So then let me go to the second slide. Echoing what Holly Ballard said about vocabulary, that you need to know what something is and what it's not. The answer writing routine is a routine for writing extended responses to prompts based on multiple sources, on text and non-text sources. It represents comprehension skills and literacy skills, reading and writing skills that are across the disciplines in the current frameworks. The extended writing tasks are found on standardized state tests, such as MCAS. They're called different things, extended writing tests. It could be open response, it could be constructed response, and they're represent on-demand classroom writing. But I want to make clear that this answer writing routine is something that we would pursue if MCAS totally went away. This is not reductionist teaching to the test. What this is a way of organizing and presenting and representing what students read and understand and then write about their subject area, what they're learning. And a critical piece of the staff training, what Littleton Middle School staff will get next week, is the staff training included practice generating extended prompts based on the content, different subject areas within their classrooms, so that the expectations of the classroom assessment and classroom checks on student understanding and learning and delving into a subject matter mirror the expectations of the large-scale, on-demand, standardized testing. Next slide, Steve. The answer writing includes these steps. Each of the letters in the capital ANSWER stand for something. The first is analyze the prompt. The second is note or notes. It's setting up two-column notes. The third is selecting relevant source info. You read the text, or you read multiple texts or pictures, and you pick out what are impertinent facts and figures. W is right. When we were in school, a lot of times you were given a writing assignment and you were stared at a blank page, and suddenly that blank page was magically going to turn into a formal composition that is publication ready. This provides the steps to the writing, but not the writing process. It's not peer editing, it's not first draft, second draft. It is the steps that a student, the analytical, comprehensive brain steps that students from 3 to 12, grades 3 to 12, would go through in writing in response to a question. I want to show one interesting application of the two-column notes. I'll start with this. during the summer, we had a Discipline with Dignity book study. Discipline with Dignity is in its 4th edition. I'm probably the oldest one in the room. I read with interest the 1st edition of the Discipline with Dignity book, and we had, it really changed my practice. I mean, this book has been an important, since the 80s, has been an important piece of 90s, since an important piece of my practice as a school level administrator, and just in thinking about schools as places where people interact respectfully. And then the 4th edition came out, and Dr. Clinchy has created a professional learning group among the administrative council. We have a culture where we order books, read them, and we take turns presenting different chapter ideas. And Discipline with Dignity was on the list to be a possible book study for the administration. And instead, we opened it as a summer book study for staff. And 30 faculty and staff signed up for the summer book study. And they presented a summary to their peers in August, right before school started, and then a reflection paper. And in the presentations to their colleagues in that August session, and I wrote it in the agenda for tonight, Kim Donlin and Jessica Schoeffel, grade 3 teachers at Russell School, they used the 2-column notes from the answer writing key to model, to present and represent the key ideas in chapters 2, 3, and 4 in Discipline with Dignity. And it was very, I mean, everyone in the room was in awe. And I mean, it's complicated. It's a whole chapter, and they have it on 3 little poster boards. Chapter 2, out of school and in school causes of discipline problems. Okay, and then chapter 4, which responsive classroom started talking about similar emphases with respectful behavior, the keys to changing behavior. This has turned out to be a little bit of a 3-column. But our teachers are very keen on this, and it's, you know, an important way to strengthen students' writing skills and comprehension skills and knowledge of the subject matter. Some of the teachers here that presented here, and today I witnessed their involvement in the trainings. Holly Ballard, Kat Dale, Melissa Maxner. I was in trainings when I saw them sit for the first time and work with their colleagues and come up with a writing prompt that would ask students questions to see if they could write about and what they know about a certain reading assignment or article. And it's very powerful. So we're very pleased to present this overview of an important and continuing professional development opportunity. Thank you. Any questions? That's the conclusion.
Well, I'd like to thank you. And, you know, I know that some of this was prompted at my request last year, but like I said earlier, I find it extremely beneficial to see the fruits of what we're doing for the, you know, one of the most critical investments is an investment in our staff. And then that investment and its payback through our students is key. I know we often get, I know I get it, I assume the other school committee members get it too, comments from the public not understanding what we're doing with all of our half days and you know. Right. So I like this opportunity for people to see what we're getting from that investment in our staff.
And I would just to reiterate, I thank you for your comments about expanding the presentation, and I also want to reiterate that we are very appreciative of the school committee and the community support for its professional development.
Thank you.
And it does make a significant difference in our classrooms.
Well, just the energy each of the teachers tonight in terms of their own energy in the presentations, that I think also just exemplified their commitment to and dedication to the work that they're doing. Up next, we have the high school alternate PE credit option update.
Sure.
We've, it's funny when you look around the table, I know tonight we have two members missing, but when we have embarked upon this journey, Daryl and Mike were the only ones on the school committee that were part of the process in determining what are we going to do to ensure that the new regulations of DESE are being met in terms of physical education, and at the same time preserve all of the broad-based programming that we had brought to the high school. So we brainstormed staff and the school committee, and we came up with, I think, not only a new plan, but a plan that really accentuates who we are as a district, and realizing that partnerships are an essential part of what we do, not only at the high school level, but in all of our schools. And this certainly emulates that philosophy. It's been very successful, and I'm not going to steal John's show, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Harrington at this time.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your support of this program. We began this journey back in 2014 with in the aftermath of a coordinated program review by the state in recognition that we needed a 4-year graduation requirement for PE. So we instituted that at the same time. And this has enabled us in a rapid fashion to implement that 4-year requirement and help give students some flexibility. My last update to the school committee about this alternative credit option in the physical education department was in just this past January. We gave some data from previous years, and I'll just be brief tonight in giving you a quick summary of some things and some highlights. But as I noted then, we have a 4-year requirement. 12.5 credits is required to graduate from Littleton High School in the Health and Wellness Department, and we do require 4 years of a course that is physically active. So this alternative credit option for PE allows more scheduling flexibility for our students. Some students need something different from the traditional PE class for a variety of reasons, more personalized options. But it still values students' time, commitment, and investment in other competitive and rigorous or vigorous activities. Some of our students are spending hours after school in their chosen sport, but also there are students who participate in things that are not necessarily connected to the high school, but are incredibly vigorous, whether it be dance or some other type of, that's a very common one for our students. And I have a list of them at the end of the slideshow. And it continues to help us in our promotion of health and wellness. In 2016 to 2017, this was a slide you saw previously, we had 152 total program participants, which was 32% of the high school. This slide here shows that 40% of enrolled LHS students participated last year, 184 total program participants. So up about 30 students from the previous year. It has grown in popularity for a variety of reasons for students, but our numbers haven't become unmanageable. We added a physical education teaching position last year that gave us the flexibility to offer other courses. That teacher is now teaching yoga, as well as some sports and games classes. So appreciate the school committee support for that position a couple of years back to help us and help our students meet the 4-year requirement. If we could go to the next slide there. This just gives you a visual depiction of the percentage of students in each class that participated in 2016, 2017. And then we'll go to the next slide. This slide, I just want to note, we discovered this afternoon that it was not labeled correctly. Where it says 2019, this was for last year, so last year's graduating class was 2018. This was taking a slide that we were using it was a template for this year, but it should say rather than 2022, it should say 2021, 2020, 2019, and then 2018. So if you could just go back in time there. But this gives you a visual depiction of the percentage of students who participate in the program based on each grade level. This slide here gives you the fall participants for the season we're in now. And you can see lots of freshmen. 47% of our participants, it's not 47% of freshmen, but 47% of the participants happen to be freshmen. A lot of the students take health, are fulfilling that graduation requirement, so they've chosen this option. 66 total participants so far, and 15% overall of our enrolled students. We'll go to the next slide, and you'll see a change there from last fall. So you've seen the increase there in participation. We had a lot of seniors last fall. We instituted this 4-year requirement with the class of 2018. So a lot of students who had postponed it realized the guidance counselors helped them. Oh, what do you mean I need to take a PE? Yep, you need to take PE to graduate from Littleton High School. So they took an alternative credit option. Bulk of them, I think, choosing it in an LHS sport. But they did go through the process to fulfill their 4th year of physical education. We can go to the next slide. Examples of non-LHS sports participation. You can see if you've ever been over to some of the nearby rinks like the one in Marlborough, the New England Sports Center, you see incredible athleticism by figure skaters on the ice. There's lots of dance studios surrounding us, and the students are very involved in that, and they're assessed on that and returning paperwork to validate their participation in that activity. But we've even accepted kids in really competitive equestrian events. A few years ago, we had a club start up at the high school for archery, or just this past year, and there are students who are really competitive archers, and one of them actually is going to college and to compete at the collegiate level in archery. So gymnastics, kickboxing, martial arts, swimming, snowboarding, they're just a few of the samples. In 2016, 2017, we had 20 students who participated in non-LHS activities get credit for it. Last year there were 10 students, and at this time, in this fall, we have 14 students in non-LHS sports participating. And it gives students, some of these students are using it to take a more rigorous course load. They want to be able to choose an additional math or an additional language. Because of that, we do, I don't know if it's necessarily, we could say it's not unintended, but the benefit, there's a plus side, that students are taking a more rigorous course load in terms of academics, but it's also it may present some challenges for us as we try to accommodate their needs to fulfill a 7-period day. Some of our students want more electives at the high school, so you might be hearing about that in relation to certain subjects. We know we're felt a little pressure because of the growth of the world language program, its popularity, and we have students doubling up in world language. We have students doubling up in math to be at an accelerated rate so they can get to Mrs. Elmore's class or Miss Elmore's class, as well as some of our other courses that are higher level courses. We have a 4-year math requirement at Littleton High School, so a lot of the students some of our more academic-oriented students really want to exercise this option, whether it's this alternative credit option, to be able to take a rigorous course load too. Some students, though, whether they're high achieving or students who are struggle, benefit from an additional study during the day, a directed study where they can get homework done, especially the athletes or students with very involved after-school lives with other commitments. Having opportunity to do homework during the day, they needed a time slot for that, and sometimes it would come. The guidance counselors were mentioning this to me today. It came at in place of taking a phys ed course for a semester. They've chosen to take a directed study so they can complete their academic work. I moved briskly through that, but I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. All right. Thank you very much.
I wanted to note that I think at the time we implemented it, Littleton was one of the first communities to pursue this
Oh, yeah.
option here on it. And, you know, part of the requirements that we had, that each of the sports, you know, there's requirements from the state in terms of the level of instruction that's also present
Yep.
during these pieces here. And you've had
50 hours, 12 to 16 weeks.
all of that as part of the process there.
Right.
So I think this has been a really innovative program that we've incorporated into our schools, and it's provided, you know, significant benefit for the students there.
Yeah. It's well received by the students, that's for sure.
When we were having discussions
With the state.
we were really torn at times because we wanted to preserve our Phys Ed programs in our schools. At the same time, we were opening this up to not an endless number of possibilities, but certainly more than we ever thought we were going to. And in the end, our prediction was correct, that our enrollments in our classes, or Phys Ed classes that are offered in our school has not gone down at all.
Right.
So it's truly a success story.
I would say, just to add, you know, there are a couple of courses we're looking at just in terms of enrollment, because we're wondering why there are at least 2 semester courses that we say, why is it, it's a little smaller than we'd like. You know, there's a couple of courses in the department, so I just want to acknowledge that for the record. But, you know, overall, like the strength and conditioning courses and some of the Fit for Life courses, our athletes want to take that during the day. They want to get their weightlifting done, or they want to get a workout in because it's part of their program, but it saves them time after school. So those courses have only boosted in enrollment. You're correct to say that it's preserved that. And I think it's given us potentially, as we look at the offerings in the department, flexibility to think, what can we potentially provides room for an adaptive PE class. We talk about inclusion all the time, but particularly for students with you know, not serious learning disabilities, but even physical disabilities, to have something that would be appropriate for them as our enrollment grows up and our population of students with potentially physical limitations of one sort or another, would allow us to do that. So I think to just add to the superintendent's words, I think it's given us some flexibility and capacity within the school that did not exist a few years back. Thank you.
Next, we have on the agenda MASC resolutions. So Jen, you will be attending the conference this year.
Yes.
Traditionally, we look at the, I have mine here, the resolutions there, and we determine whether we're going to take a position on those as a committee or leave it up to the delegate based on the discussions at the time there. I can go either way in terms of which way the committee would prefer to, you know, we can either go through one by one and take a position on each one, or we could do as we've done in the past, allow the flexibility of our delegate to vote and then report back the overall votes of the resolutions there. Erica, any preference?
I don't think I ever got that, so I'd like to at least
Yeah.
see what they are.
Oh, you have, I think I got one in the mail.
Yeah.
I just thought, I don't want to just
They're
throw
on,
it to you.
they're on the website as
They're
well,
on
the
the website.
MASC
Okay.
website. Everything's on there. Yeah.
It's more towards the back.
You know, this is, you know, something, Daryl, that we can think about, and even if we give the flexibility to the delegate to vote, I think it's important that we at least have a discussion.
Yeah.
As a school committee.
And we should do that as a full committee, not just a
You know,
partial.
Then Jen will have an idea of you know, how the school committee feels about various resolutions that are being presented, so she'll have a more complete picture.
Some of them are pretty straightforward, and some may involve some level of discussion there based on the specific resolutions being proposed. I know last year there was one that was a little bit more politically motivated than educationally motivated, which caused me to have pause as to us taking a position on it there. So I guess what we'd probably do at this point is we'll informally note that we're going to designate Jen as our delegate. there, and maybe postpone to the next meeting where I think we'll have a full quorum for voting whether we'll take a position or what that position will be on the articles, the resolutions there.
These are.
Could actually be at our next meeting or the.
As long as we get it in before the 9th, right?
9th, so it could be the last meeting.
Yeah, because I think we may have a full agenda next meeting if the chief of police comes, right?
So we can put it to the second meeting in October.
Yeah, that would probably be better.
Probably work. Excellent.
Into your financial update?
Yep, so you have, there's a 2-page report in your system, in your packet. The first is a summary on where we ended FY18, which was last year, ended June 30th. I'll get back to that in a second. The second page is a list of the revolving funds and where we ended the year in the revolving funds. So I'd just like to explain, because if people, when you review this, it looks like there's some big numbers, the 652 and the 670. And I'd just like to explain a little bit about some of the processes that happened. So the $652,000 looks like a savings in the regular education. It's not really a savings. There are a couple of events that happened over the year last year. We did have some savings within the budget, some tuition reimbursements, some transportation, some substitute lines. There are a number of areas where we actually experienced some savings. We also took we had a big credit from the electric company for some prior years overpayments that they realized and we realized we worked out. So we were able to take that credit last year. That was about $150,000. So that's $150,000 of utility bills that we didn't have to pay last year. So that translates into savings. So really what this is it's a shift from regular education to special education. And what it allowed us to do is, instead of spending additional money out of the revolving funds, school choice, we're able to use their savings in the appropriated budget to pay for special education, out-of-district tuition, and things of that nature. So that's why it looks like the special education is so high, because we put more tuition in there than we had planned on, because we had planned on using the school choice. And then the next page, which is the school choice, shows that the school choice balance ended higher than we had initially forecasted when we did that initial FY18 budget. So that's kind of the story behind what those numbers are, and I just wanted to explain that it's not really savings. There were some one-time events that allowed us just to move some funds within the budget to do that. And we haven't typically gone and done budget adjustments and amendments within the budget. We just leave the budget as it is and then report on the actuals. But the actuals are what the actuals are, and that's what we have to report out on the end of the year Department of Education report, so that those expenses are tracked correctly. So
and it's a complex process, and there are moving parts. We first of all have an appropriated budget that by law needs to be approved by the town. Then we have a school committee approved budget, which is different, and that includes school choice and circuit breaker. So we're under an obligation to talk about the appropriated budget, because that was voted on by the town, the community more correctly, and then we're injecting or taking out, depending on the year, school choice fund, circuit breaker fund. So we actually ended up close to, I don't know the exact dollar amount, but it was close to $300,000 better than we thought we were going to, and 150 of that was, of course, the electrical. I won't call it a gift, but it was a surprise, because they've been overcharging us. And thanks to our energy manager, he caught that. So it's a good thing to catch.
Right. We also, as the opportunity allows, we push some salaries out into other funding sources. So if the kindergarten tuition receipts are higher than we had anticipated, or the pre-K tuition receipts are higher than anticipated, we can reallocate some of those and pay some of those salaries out of those funds, thus freeing up the appropriated funds as well. So,
Jen, any questions?
but we did spend all the money.
That was evident.
The $5,800 that you see, the $5,800 that you see here as a balance, actually, we encumber that. Those are invoices that we encumbered at the beginning, at the end of the year, just didn't get the invoices. So that money will actually carry forward into FY19, and we'll spend that money in FY19.
So, one thing, and, you know, maybe I'll talk to Mike and Kelly about maybe push it back through the budget subcommittee piece there. I think maybe a short paragraph that described those major things there would be useful in the pre-packet, so that I wasn't trying to track down what happened to all that money, kind of thing there. The other piece, and I think maybe as we look at our budget build and reporting process, I know we have the formal report, which I like this one here, which captures our appropriated budget, but we also prepare the budget and authorize authorizations for expense against the various revolving accounts as part of our complete budget. I would like to maybe start seeing that report also.
Categorized.
Kind of thing there. Because what I found when I was looking at the next page here, I ended up going back to 2 years worth of budget budget presentations to find out how much we'd authorized you to use under school choice. And so having that captured someplace so that we can see the expense against the accounts versus what we authorized against it, I think will help us just providing that complete picture there. But I don't want to direct that. I would like that to be part of the budget presentation discussions there. But thank you very much for the update.
Okay. And if you think of any questions later, let me know, and I'll be more than glad to. Thank you.
Interested citizens? We lost our audience.
We did.
Subcommittee reports. PNBC, there'll be a meeting on Wednesday. I think we've come to resolution on the approach that we'll do for the pole vault facility there. So we'll be providing some direction to the PNBC to request a bid package so that we can get the pricing, so that we can understand how that might be funded there. Mike is not here to report on budget, and we just had an update, and then policy.
No updates on the one from last week.
We'll be putting it on the next meeting for second reading with the changes that were recommended. And just to bring this to your attention, we'll put it on the next meeting. The warrant article that the town is proposing about one-day liquor licenses in buildings does include school buildings. So we will need to have that discussion as a school committee next meeting. We have the authority to say yes or the authority to say no, independent of what the vote is. So I just wanted you to bring that to your attention.
Can you, I did a little bit of looking to try to find out what other towns have done relative to their school committees relative to that same type of provision. Could you get a sampling of our surrounding communities for their position on that?
Sure. Yes, I will. It's interesting. Offhand, I don't know of any schools that allow liquor in the schools with a license after hours. So, but I will do it.
Yeah, I saw like Framingham did it, but that was, like I said, that was just 5 minutes of Googling and not a true polling of.
I should have a meeting tomorrow with 15 superintendents.
If you could give us a sense of what other communities are doing that represent our typical population, that would be appreciative.
Sure.
And would it be decided, if we did say, yes, this is okay, would it then still be decided on a case-by-case basis, or
Yes.
would it?
Yes, no, we would not.
But
Even if
those are the
answer
details I
was
want to make
yes.
sure that are reflected in the language that comes in front of us also. So
We would make a motion to, you can only make it so detailed, but specific enough to indicate, first of all, the direction we're going, and then, direction to us in terms of what are your stipulations. But everyone would have to be reviewed, and since it's school buildings, we fall under under operational and school committee policy, the town would not be reviewing, we would be reviewing.
Right.
So-
But those are the formalities, and we want to make sure that are all in place. You know, I just saw it briefly when it came, you know, before coming to the meeting tonight.
I was a bit surprised because I posed that question, you know, with the assumption that the buildings are really school committee buildings. We've had the land transfers and everything else, so I was taken back a little bit in terms of realizing that, well, that does include school buildings because we are a separate entity in that area, but the way I guess the bylaws are worded, that it was all inclusive. So.
Yeah, like I said, I just did only a few minutes of research on it, and I want to make sure that we understand the intersecting laws also that overlap on that there. So we'll be seeing that next meeting. Is that the plan?
Well, I would like to. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have a concluding discussion. I would, possible, I would like that. But I mean, we have even after the town meeting, we still have the authority to set direction. So, I always like to do things beforehand and be proactive if we can. So I'll look around. I'll talk to some superintendents who have that information. And really, the discussion is philosophical in terms of, is this something as a school committee that you feel is acceptable considering our mandate of educating children? So to speak. I mean, I've had experience in various areas and international experience, and cultures have very different ideas in this area as well. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Daryl.